Hi, it's Richard here from On Demand Education. For those of you looking for a brief walkthrough of what's new in Oracle Policy Automation version 12 versus version 10, well, I hope this video goes some way to explaining. We'll start with an explanation of what's changed from an installation perspective. In previous versions, I personally was in the habit of picking out a very old laptop or a very old virtual machine with Windows XP on it, simply installing Oracle Policy Modeler, maybe installing Tomcat if I was feeling energetic to have an extra server for testing deployment, but apart from that, nothing much else. Now, however, things have changed. In this new environment, I will need to install Oracle WebLogic Server. As you can see here, I have version 12c. The supplied installation script for Oracle Policy Automation Server components requires you to have already installed WebLogic Server and have information about connectivity to hand. Installing the Oracle Policy Automation Server components will give you the traditional web determinations and the determination server, but it will also give you the Oracle Policy Automation Hub, where you can manage tracking changes, deploying rule bases, establishing web service-based connections, and creating or managing users who can connect to the hub. When you install Oracle Policy Automation Hub, there will only be two users, admin, whose password will be set during the installation process, and author. Author will actually be disabled, so you will need perhaps to enable it when you first start testing. And of course, it goes without saying that the same screen offers us the capability to add users, change passwords, and monitor and change their access to web service APIs. We'll come back to this tool in this video, but also in later videos in this series. Because we now have a hub for managing versions and tracking changes, in the back end, we also have a database. You have two choices. You can either install an Oracle database or you can install MySQL, which is also supported. The quickest way to install it would be to download the MySQL 5.1 full installation kit and install everything. At least that's what I did, and it worked just fine. You don't need to create a schema or any users. You simply download and install MySQL. When the Oracle Policy Automation installation will take care of adding the database schema and help you set up the initial user. What else has changed? Well, the Oracle Policy Modeling Windows client has had a bit of a lookover in order to take into account the ability to pull and push items from your hub, as well as changing how we access things like, well, the properties file, languages, and so on. Let's begin by creating a new project. We'll call this one Test 12 for version 12. We see traditional options like the language and the region and the folder name. We'll just go ahead and click Create. You'll notice that the Rules tab is where we add Word and Excel documents and where we can create new folders to match our source documentation and so on. One single Word file is added by default. If I go back to the Project tab, you will notice that in this Project tab I have a summary of the project, the data model, the rule documents, and so on. I also have tabs that were not existing in 10.4, such as setting up custom verbs, changing the region, time zone, formatting, and adding one or more translation files. We'll talk about the other items in this toolbar later on. Now let's think about the hub. If I want to, I can add this project to the repository, which will cause it to become one of the change tracked projects in my Oracle Policy Modeling Hub. So let's go ahead and go to the Rules tab, open our Word document. While we're here, you will notice that there are a couple of changes in the ribbon as well. Vastly reduced complexity, still the same icons, but some missing icons as well. I'm going to go ahead and type something now just for the purposes of having a rule in my rule base. Refreshingly, the keyboard shortcuts that we're familiar with, like Alt-Shift F1 and Alt-C for conclusions, still work. I'm going to validate my work, and I will see there are no errors, and I will save and close my file. I will return to the Project tab, and I will add this project to the repository. If I haven't already, I will need to type in the details of where my WebLogic server, or my hub application is, if you will, and obviously the password. I can add comments for this version. Now that it's been added to the hub, unsurprisingly, when I go to my application in WebLogic, I can see the project is here in the hub. I can click on it, and I can see that it's currently at version 1, authored by admin with any comments, and I can download that particular version if I need to. I'm going to go back to my rule base, go back to my Word file, validate my work, close the file, go back to my project tab, and I will now upload changes and say that this is the enhanced version. I return to my WebLogic application, and I can now see that I have a tracking of both versions. Returning now to focus on the Windows-based application, what else is new? Well, the Data tab is what you and I would have known in 10.4 as the Properties file, where we can see entities, relationships, attributes. We'll talk about mappings another day, but I'm sure you've worked out what it is. The Interview tab, however, is something completely new in that it's a different approach to building question screens. Question screens now can be edited using a rather more friendly graphical interface, and we can simply click on it and add it. We can manipulate elements. We can change text. And we can change the properties. We can add properties. We can add logic, screen attributes, show it if. We can create stages, which allows us to build something like a screen order, and we can apply we can use single or multiple goals and add them to screens. So although the approach is slightly different, the same fundamentals are here. Adding new controls, for example, to collect entity instances, adding new labels, adding new inputs for any of our attributes, and so on. What does improve the general aspect is the ability to copy and paste, cut and paste, delete screens, and so on. The debug button, which I'm going to click on now, runs the debugger. A word of warning is that in order for the debugger to work, you will need to have installed a JRE, if nothing else, and your Java_home environment variable will need to be pointing to it. Otherwise, you may find that it doesn't work. So, is the customer's complaint managed? Yes. Next. The customer rewarded? Yes. Next. The customer is happy. And I can drill down, or the equivalent of Y, if you will, to see what the logic is behind this conclusion. The Data tab is the familiar Data tab from the debugger with the same color schemes, and the decision is exactly what you'd expect it to be, and the context menu in the Data tab is just the same. Notice the usual import and export buttons, temporal options, and restart the debugger. Well, that's it for our whistle-stop tour of what's new in version 12. In the next chapter of this series, we will take a little deeper look into the concept of mappings and the concept of connections, which you can see in your hub. To finish, though, we are going to deploy our rule base. So I'm going to go to the Project tab, and I'm going to deploy a snapshot. And you'll notice that I get a message telling me that I will have a new deployment. The deployment is complete. I will refresh the deployments list, and I will go and click on the Run Interview icon, and I will now be able to see the web determination just as we saw in the debugger. Complete with the same graphical layout. Notice that I'm using the web determinations, so the URL is pretty standard, my WebLogic application, the deployment name, and the web determinations followed by the screen and so on. So much of this should be fairly familiar to you. That's it for now. I hope you enjoyed our whistle-stop tour, and I'll see you in the next chapter when we talk about what else is new.